In the beginning of the movie, we meet Chris, who is on vacation. He encounters a girl who shares the same qualities as Chris. As a result, they start to like each other. Annie is the girl's name, and Chris and Annie marry each other. Both had 2 children and live happily ever after. Their children go to school one day but didn't return because their school bus had an accident and both die in a car accident. After their family disperses, Chris and Annie experience a trauma. It was really tough for them to return to normalcy. Later, we see Chris in his hospital for many years later. He was observing the report of a child, and this was 4 years later time. Meanwhile, he receives a call from Annie, who informs him that, today, she needed to receive 8 paintings to display at an exhibition. However, Annie was concerned since the paintings had not yet arrived. Chris, her husband, tells her not to be concerned. If your paintings have not arrived, put them on show in the exhibition. He said this because Annie could paint well. Annie, on the other hand, does not agree with his idea and explains how it is possible. How could I show my paintings while they are all displayed at home? Chris tells her that after he is released from the hospital, he'll bring it from home. Annie is relieved that Chris has taken up part of his time for her. Chris also completes his tasks so he could help give paintings to Annie. When he was coming back, he sees many cars accident. When he comes out of his car to help them. He sees a car was flipped and there was a lady in it. Chris wants to help the lady, but a car speedily collides with Chris and Chris dies on the spot there. Annie believed she was the cause of Chris' death. She was heartbroken and worried that her family isn't with her today. Her children died first, and now her husband has passed away. She had no one with her and was considering herself defective. If she had gone to pick up her children from school, nothing had happened. And her husband didn't have an accident today if she had not urged him to come fast. Meanwhile, Chris is seen with Annie. But it was Chris's soul that she can't see, and he tries to communicate with her. Annie senses a shadow when he calls her. The shadow sees Annie, claims you've died and to go from there. But he tells that shadow that he'll not go anywhere, he'll live with Annie. The shadow tells his name, Albert. Why don't I see you? Chris says to the shadow. You can see me whenever you want. Meanwhile, Annie is writing something for Chris. Chris wishes to realize his presence. He slid Annie's pen and says that I'm here and feel me. Annie begins to cry and she departs. She asserts that it's merely her illusion and that it's unattainable. Chris has died and Annie visits his grave the next day. Chris was also present and Chris wishes her to feel his presence. Chris believes he's died and can't be seen by humans since she tears a lot. I should proceed from there, and he departs. Later, we encounter Chris in an unusual world. This was an unusual world. It was painted and the shadow meets Chris there as well. Chris was able to see him, and his name was Albert. This world seems familiar to Chris. This universe was, in fact, Annie's artwork. This was the world in which Chris desired to live with Annie. Albert informs Chris that we get to our favorite place after death. Chris sees a house that was Annie's picture and desired to live with her there. Chris and Albert go there. This world becomes normal after Albert creates a hole in it. Annie was painting while the world was being created. In the artwork, She creates a lovely tree. Chris's world was also influenced by this painting. Chris sees the lovely tree in his world as well. Albert informs him that you're soulmates, which explains why her painting has an impact on the globe. Now, Annie dislikes this artwork and pours water on it, causing the painting to vanish and the lovely tree to ruin Chris' world. The leaves of this tree shattered and Chris became really sad. He learns that Annie is completely alone in this world. Meanwhile, Chris discovers a toy of his daughter in the world. He takes it and happily informs Albert that he will now be able to meet his daughter. Albert tells that this is the world in which everyone has created their own world. Your children must have created their own universe. Chris asks what I might possibly do to meet my children. You can meet them whenever you want, according to Albert. Later, a girl approaches Chris and informs him that Albert has sent her. Do you want to visit my world? Chris agrees and follows the girl, beginning to converse with him. Chris was not paying attention to her since he wanted to meet his daughters. She tells him what she likes and doesn't like. When he was telling her, he recalls her heavenly home and realizes that this world, it looked a lot like that heaven house. Chris learns from the girl that he was flying with his father one day. Meanwhile, an Asian air hostess was on the scene. After seeing her, my father told her that Asian girls are very attractive and mature, and I've resolved to look like this flight hostess one day. After hearing this, he realizes that the girl is his daughter, Marie. When he realizes that he could see his daughter, Chris cries as he hugs his daughter, who he had not seen in a long time. Later, Chris returns to his world, where he meets Albert. However, Albert appears to be concerned this time, and when he inquires, he is informed that your wife has taken her life. Chris is saddened when he learns this, but he tells him that she has no choice because she is alone in this world. Chris claims Annie would meet me for this reason. Meanwhile, Albert informs him that it is not like this. She took her own life and will not go to heaven, but rather to hell, and you can't meet her. And after listening to this ragged, I can't let her live in hell because she says it can't happen. She should live with me because I am her soulmate. Albert claims that you are not permitted to enter that planet, because whoever enters that planet never returns. She has taken her, and this is her world. Chris is adamant about meeting Annie, and Albert says you should have a chance. Albert claims that I'll find a guide who can assist you in entering heaven and guide you. Later, Albert takes him into a library where an old man will guide them. Chris, along with Albert and the old man, boards a ship for going. Their boat was passing from the sea, but its path was quite horrible. The long waves of the sea were floating there. When a large number of souls arrived, they drove them into the water. Later, we see them on a beach, and Chris inquires as to which universe they are in. This, according to his guide, is the entrance to hell. The old man claims that he is not receiving Annie's signal because Chris couldn't stop thinking about his son. He advises him to study and focus on his education in order to become a big man and assist the people, and Chris recognizes Albert as his son. After he died, he continued to aid others, including his father. As soon as Chris recognizes him, his son embraces him and says, "You've practiced your medical by following Albert. Do you know why I'm Albert?" The old guy now informs Chris that Albert, Chris's son, he is unable to join us because he was before thinking about his wife. He might not think that much. Chris should continue if he wants to meet his wife. Albert stops there and wishes his father to go and takes his mother and Chris's wife. Chris discovers multiple heads stuck in the ground after visiting the place. In the meantime, he catches sight of Annie's figure and yearns to pay her a visit. The earth begins to crack as he approaches her. Everything started to tumble, even Chris. He later arrives at a house, recalling Annie's memories. That was a broken house, but upon closer inspection, he recalls that it was the dream house of Annie and him. Meanwhile, the old man says him not to stay long. You can't stay here more than 3 minutes, because everything is based on Annie's memories. They'll be stuck here like Annie if they stop her for too long. Furthermore, Annie has forgotten everything. This is why this house is broken. Chris only has 3 minutes to remind Annie of everything. Otherwise, he'll end up like Annie, stuck there. He recognizes him as Dr. Albert after listening to the old man. Dr. Albert was the same person who guided him after he died. Later, Chris starts looking for Annie in this rundown house. He eventually locates Annie, who had been calling his name. When he comes across her, though, she doesn't recognize him. He told her over and over that he was her Chris. But she didn't recognize him and was thinking to herself, he could be someone else telling himself Chris. He tries to comprehend Annie, but she refuses to listen. Chris gives up and walks back to Albert, telling him that I've given up. Annie isn't persuaded, and the old man claims that this is your journey, not Annie's. You've been brought here to see that this is Annie's world, not yours. Your world is paradise, and you can no longer live together. It is preferable for you to join me in heaven as soon as possible. Chris claims that you've realized I've given up, but you couldn't see why I'd given up. My defeat is that I am unable to let her remember me. But instead of going to heaven, I'll spend eternity with Annie in hell. He tells the old man that he should tell his children how much he loves them. Later, Chris approaches Annie and compliments her on her outstanding wife. You've always taken care of your children and husband. You cared so much about us that you sacrificed your life after we left, in order for you to meet us. Chris was holding Annie's hand tightly. He was crying after stating all of this. Annie realizes that he is her Chris after listening to him. Annie's memories were now being restored, while Chris' memory was fading. Chris's memory was fading, but Annie had brought everything back to him. Chris' eyes closed before she could take him out of this world. But when he opens his eyes again, he is in heaven. He'd returned to the same place where he'd agreed to live with Annie. He was thinking that this was their fantasy place, since he had arrived alone in heaven and Annie had gone alone in hell. Meanwhile, we see Annie, who was in heaven, behind him. She later meets her children and becomes fairly happy. In the last scene, we see Annie and Chris telling each other, we should take a new life, and in that new life, we'll again together. And we'll make our pretty world. Later, we see 2 children who are Chris and Annie. They've taken a new life and met each other, which means they've found each other.